Noah Zeff's hand was 2 inches from the doorknob when fingers locked around his wrist like a vice. He spun, instinct putting his free hand on the Glock at his hip, ready to put a bullet in whoever was stupid enough to touch him. Sandra Ausen, the maid, stared back with eyes that held no fear, only urgency that stopped his finger on the trigger. "Quiet," she whispered, the single word cutting through the bass-heavy music bleeding from inside the apartment. "You go in there now, you lose everything." Noah's jaw clenched. He'd driven across the city at midnight because his gut, the same instinct that kept him alive through Seoul's gang wars, screamed that something was wrong. 6 months of Tijani's excuses. 6 months of, "not tonight, babe," and "maybe next week," in the apartment he paid for. 6 months of playing the respectful boyfriend while his blood whispered that he was being played. "Get off me," he growled, voice deadly low. Sandra didn't move. Instead, she angled her body, giving him a sightline through the crack in the door. What Noah saw through that gap detonated in his chest like a grenade. Professional ring lights. Cameras on tripods, red recording indicators glowing. Tijani, his Tijani, wearing black lingerie he'd never seen, her body wrapped around 3 men he'd never met. A laptop on the coffee table showed a live chat, dollar amounts scrolling past, comments he could barely read through the red haze flooding his vision. "Chat wants the bedroom scene next," one of the men laughed, adjusting a camera. "They're tipping heavy tonight." Tijani's voice, performative, theatrical, nothing like the soft tone she used with him, sliced through Noah's skull. "Tell them it's extra. I don't do bedroom for less than 500. She checked her phone. "My boyfriend's calling around 1. We need to wrap before then." He's so fucking predictable. The Glock was in Noah's hand before conscious thought. His shoulder dropped, ready to kick the door off its hinges, ready to paint the walls with their blood, ready to make them understand what happened when you betrayed a man who'd built an empire on bodies. Sandra slammed into him with her full weight, driving him against the hallway wall with shocking strength. "Not yet," she hissed, her hands pinning his gun arm. "Those cameras are positioned at the door. She's waiting for you to storm in." Abuse claim. Self-defense. She's already got the story written, and you're about to give her the ending she needs. "I don't give a fuck about her story." "You should." Sandra's voice cracked but held firm. "Because I've been documenting hers for 8 weeks. Bank records, contracts with those men, text messages about trapping the Mafia ATM. All of it legal, all of it admissible, all of it yours, if you don't give her what she wants right now." Noah's breathing was ragged, his vision still locked on that crack in the door, watching the woman he'd planned to marry negotiate pricing for her body with strangers. "What she wants. She wants you to walk through that door like the jealous boyfriend," Sandra whispered. "She's been baiting you for months. That's why she keeps rejecting your calls. She knows you'll eventually snap and show up." "This isn't cheating, Mr. Zeff. This is a trap." Through the door, Tijani laughed. The sound used to make Noah smile. Now it made him want to commit murder. "Show me," he said, voice barely human. "Show me everything. And then show me how to destroy her." Sandra released his wrist slowly, watching to make sure the gun stayed holstered. "Follow me." Quietly. Noah took one last look through the crack, Tijani counting cash, completely unaware that 6 feet away in the darkness, the man she'd been playing had just chosen patience over violence. He turned away from the door. From the woman he'd loved. From the marriage he'd imagined. And followed the maid who'd just saved him from himself into the shadows of the hallway. Behind them, Tijani's performative moans echoed through the door. Ahead of them, Sandra opened her quarters and pulled out a filing cabinet that would end Tijani's world. 8 weeks, Sandra said, spreading documents across her bed like a prosecutor building a murder case. "I've been waiting 8 weeks for you to finally show up. Welcome to the evidence room, Mr. Zeff." Noah stared at the bank statements, the screenshots, the text messages, all of it damning, all of it nuclear. "Now let me show you how to kill someone without pulling a trigger." Before we dive into Noah's story, if you're enjoying this tale of betrayal and revenge, smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss these jaw-dropping stories. Trust me, you won't believe where this goes. Now, let's get into it. Noah's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, rain hammering his windshield like accusations he'd been ignoring for months. The wipers scraped across glass, back and forth, the rhythm matching the war in his head. Trust her. She loves you. She's lying. You know she's lying. His phone sat in the cup holder, to Johnny's text still glowing. Not tonight, babe. Big exam tomorrow. Love you, 2 hearts. The heart emoji felt like a knife between his ribs. How many times had he seen that exact message? 15? 20? Each one a perfectly crafted excuse wrapped in affection. School, friends, headaches, family emergencies. The girl who'd promised him forever 6 months ago now treated his presence like an inconvenience. No's jaw clenched as he remembered their first meeting, her smile in that coffee shop, the way she'd leaned in when he spoke, making him feel like he was more than just the violent empire he'd built. She'd said she wanted a future with him. A real life. Marriage. Kids. Legitimacy he'd been chasing his whole criminal career. I don't care what you do for work, Noah. I care about who you are. Lies. All of it lies. He could feel it in his gut, the same instinct that warned him before ambushes, before betrayals, before bullets found their targets. But another voice whispered doubt. What if you're wrong? What if she really does have an exam? What if you're the problem, jealous, controlling, exactly what she doesn't need? Noah turned onto her street and killed the headlights 3 blocks early. Old habits. The rain blurred the streetlights into watercolor smears that looked like tears he'd never let himself cry. He checked the Glock at his hip. Muscle memory. Preparation for possibilities his mind refused to fully form. Please be studying. Please be alone. Please prove me wrong. But Noah Zeph hadn't survived this long by hoping. He stepped into the rain, and whatever came next would change everything. The spare key felt like a confession in No's palm, proof he'd never fully trusted her, even when he pretended to. He'd kept it when she asked for privacy, telling himself it was just security protocol. Now, slipping it into the building's entrance lock, he knew he'd always been waiting for this moment. The click echoed too loud in the empty lobby. Inside, the stairwell swallowed him in fluorescent silence. Each step up amplified the bass-heavy music bleeding through walls, electronic, pulsing, the kind of soundtrack that didn't match studying for exams. No's trained ear caught the rhythm, the deliberate tempo. This wasn't background music. This was production. 2nd floor. 3rd floor. His breathing stayed controlled, combat steady, even as his heart tried to punch through his ribs. I chose this building. The thought burned hotter with each step. I toured these units. Picked the corner apartment for better light. Furnished it with pieces she said she loved. His fingers brushed the stair railing he'd approved, walked hallways he'd measured for security. This is mine. 4th floor. The music was clearer now, louder, vibrating through his chest. And beneath it, voices. Laughter. Multiple voices. Male voices. She is mine. No's hand moved to his hip, fingers finding the Glock's grip like greeting an old friend. The cold steel steadied something wild trying to break free in his chest. He'd killed men for stepping on his territory. What did you do to someone who invited strangers into the home you built for her? He reached her door, 4C, brass numbers he'd installed himself, and froze. The music hit him full force now, but it was the voice beneath it that stopped his breath. To Johnny's voice. Except it wasn't her voice. Not the soft tone she used when they talked on the phone. Not the sleepy whisper from their few intimate moments. This was theatrical. Performative. Practiced. Louder, she commanded someone. Chat wants to hear more. Chat? No's finger slid to the trigger. Every instinct screamed trap. Unlocked door, loud music, too many variables he couldn't control. His training from Seoul told him to retreat, regroup, gather intelligence. But his hand was already on the doorknob, pushing gently, and through the gap he saw lights, professional, circular, blinding white. And then he saw her, and his training shattered like glass. What he witnessed in the next 6 seconds would either make him a murderer or teach him there were worse things than killing. The door opened 6 inches, enough to see everything, enough to destroy him. Professional ring lights created an artificial sun in what used to be the living room. 3 cameras on tripods pointed at the couch, his couch, the Italian leather he'd surprised her with, where to Johnny's naked body writhed between 3 men Noah had never seen. Their hands on her skin. Her mouth on them. The performance choreographed with the precision of people who'd done this before. Many times before. A soundboard sat on the coffee table, controlling the bass-heavy music. Next to it, a laptop screen glowed with a live chat scrolling faster than Noah could read. Dollar amounts flashed past. Tips, requests, commands from strangers watching his fiancée like she was merchandise. Because she was. She'd turned herself into a product and his apartment into a studio. One of the men, tattooed, muscular, professional, adjusted a camera angle without breaking rhythm. Chat wants the bedroom scene next. They're tipping heavy tonight. Tajani's voice cut through the music, breathless but businesslike. Tell them it's extra. I don't do bedroom for less than 500. She grabbed her phone from the armrest, scrolling with one hand while her body moved with practiced efficiency. My boyfriend's supposed to call around 1. We need to wrap the next 2 scenes before then. She laughed. The sound used to make Noah smile. He's so fucking predictable. 6 months and he still hasn't figured it out. The world collapsed into a tunnel. Noah's vision narrowed to Tajani's face, flushed, smiling, completely unaware. His finger found the trigger. The weight of the Glock felt righteous in his hand. He'd killed men for less. Much less. Killed them for disrespect. For stepping on his territory. For looking at him wrong across a negotiation table. This woman had promised him forever. Had looked into his eyes and said she wanted to build a life with him. Had accepted his ring, not yet, she'd said, after graduation, and made him believe in something beyond the violence that defined him. And she'd been monetizing his absence. Performing for strangers in his home. Laughing about how predictable he was. The betrayal didn't feel like a knife. It felt like drowning in acid. Like every cell in his body was dissolving, leaving nothing but rage and the primal need to make her understand what she'd done. Noah stepped forward. The floorboard creaked. Tajani's head turned slightly toward the sound. And then a hand locked around Noah's wrist like iron, and Sandra Osen's voice whispered the only word that could stop a man seconds from murder. Quiet. Sandra materialized from the kitchen hallway like a shadow gaining substance, her hand locking around Noah's wrist with strength that shocked him. Not to hurt, to anchor. To keep him from crossing a threshold he couldn't uncross. Quiet, she whispered, and the authority in that single word cut through his rage like a blade through smoke. Noah could have broken free. Could have snapped her arm with minimal effort. Could have brushed her aside like paper and stormed through that door to end what he was seeing. But something in Sandra's expression stopped him cold, not fear of him, but fear for him. Like she was watching him walk toward a cliff he couldn't see. She pulled him backward, away from the door, her eyes locked on his face with desperate intensity. You think you're walking into a fight, she said, voice barely audible over the music still pulsing from inside. You're walking into a courtroom ambush. I don't give a fuck about those cameras? Sandra cut him off, her grip tightening. They're not just for her OnlyFans stream. Look at the angles. She forced his head to turn back toward the crack in the door. 2 cameras on the couch. 1 camera pointed at the entrance. At the door, Mr. Zeff. The camera you almost walked in front of. Nose training kicked in through the red haze. He looked again, forcing himself past Tajani's body, past the men, to the equipment setup. Sandra was right. The 3rd camera wasn't capturing the scene on the couch. It was aimed at the doorway. At the exact spot where he'd been standing. She's been waiting for you, Sandra continued, pulling him further down the hallway, into the shadows. Every Thursday night for 2 months. Same setup. Same timing. Right when she knows you're most likely to break and show up unannounced. How do you? Because I've been watching her watch the door. Sandra's voice cracked but held firm. Every session, she positions that camera first. Every session, she mentions your call time to those men. Every session, she tells them to be ready to act scared if someone comes in. Noah's blood turned to ice. Act scared. Domestic violence defense, Sandra said flatly. Jealous Mafia boyfriend breaks in, attacks her and her friends during innocent gathering. Self-defense. Abuse claims. Restraining order. Then she gets the apartment, the settlement, and the victim story she can sell to tabloids. She pulled a phone from her apron pocket, showing Noah a voice memo timestamped 2 weeks ago. Tajani's voice, crystal clear, if he shows up, we scatter. I scream. Camera catches everything. My lawyer says it's worth at least $500,000 in the settlement. Noah stared at the phone, then at Sandra, then back at the crack in the door where Tajani continued performing, completely unaware she'd just lost. How long have you been documenting this? He asked quietly. Sandra's answer would change everything. 8 weeks. And I have all of it. If this story has you hooked, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. You'll want to see how Noah gets his revenge. Also, drop a comment telling me what you'd do in his situation. Now back to the story. Sandra's quarters were small, tucked off the kitchen like an afterthought, a space Noah had paid for but never entered. She unlocked a filing cabinet with hands that didn't shake, spreading documents across her narrow bed like a prosecutor building a murder case. Bank statements hit the bedspread first. Noah's eyes caught the numbers. OnlyFans deposits. $8,200, $12,400, $15,900. Monthly totals climbing. 3 months of statements showing $47,000 in income from the apartment he furnished. She's been running this operation since week 2 of your relationship, Sandra said quietly. Next came contracts, professional, notarized, clinical. The 3 men weren't random. They were paid performers from an adult entertainment agency. $800 per session. Weekly bookings, to Johnny's signature on every page. Then text messages, printed and highlighted. To Johnny to someone named Kira, the Mafia ATM is so easy. Give him some PSSY twice a month, he pays for everything else. Marriage locks it in permanently, asterisk. Noah's hands shook holding the paper. The final document was an audio file timestamp. Sandra pressed play on her phone. To Johnny's voice, casual, businesslike, he's too proud to check on me. Too guilty about his criminal lifestyle to be the controlling boyfriend. I can milk this at least another year before the wedding, then I'm set for life. Child support alone would be 6 figures. Laughter in the background. Someone asking, what if he finds out? That's what the cameras are for. The recording stopped. Silence filled the small room, broken only by Noah's ragged breathing. 8 weeks, Sandra said, watching him with clinical calm. Since I heard them rehearsing what to say if you showed up. She has a plan, Mr. Zeff. You storm in there, those cameras catch you attacking her. She's got journalists on speed dial. The story runs before you can control it. Sandra paused, letting the weight settle. You kill her tonight, you die too. Maybe not physically, but legally, socially, financially, you won't survive. Noah looked up, and Sandra saw the question in his eyes before he asked it. Then what the hell do I do? Noah sat on the edge of Sandra's bed, head in his hands, evidence scattered around him like shrapnel from an explosion he hadn't seen coming. Bank statements, contracts, text messages calling him an ATM, audio recordings planning his destruction. Every instinct screamed at him to stand up, walk back into that living room, and end this the way he'd ended every problem in his life, swift, brutal, final. 3 bullets, 4 bodies, problem solved. But Sandra's words kept echoing, she wins. The realization hit him like a punch to the solar plexus. Violence wasn't power. Violence was predictability. And to Johnny had been counting on exactly that, counting on him being the man he'd always been. The mafia boss who solved problems with his fists and his gun. The jealous boyfriend who'd storm in and give her everything she needed to destroy him. She'd studied him, learned him, weaponized his own nature against him. For the first time in his criminal career, Noah Zeff didn't know what to do. What do I do? The words felt foreign in his mouth. He'd never asked for advice. Never needed it. He'd always known the answer, always trusted his instincts, always moved with the certainty of a man who controlled his world. But his world was burning, and he was holding the match she'd handed him. Sandra sat across from him, her voice calm, clinical. You leave. Tonight. Right now. You let her think she's safe. Let her finish her session, count her money, go to sleep believing you're still the predictable boyfriend who respects her boundaries. Noah's jaw clenched. And then? Tomorrow morning, you file a civil lawsuit for fraud, breach of contract, and misuse of property. You use my evidence, all of it. Bank records showing she built a business using your resources. Contracts proving premeditation. Text messages showing intent to defraud. Audio proving she planned to trap you. Sandra leaned forward. You destroy her the way she planned to destroy you, slowly, publicly, legally. You take everything. The apartment. The furniture. Restitution for every dollar you spent. And you do it in a courtroom where cameras can't save her and victim stories don't work against documentation. Noah looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. This woman he'd barely noticed in 6 months had been protecting him while he'd been blind. "That's not who I am," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sandra's answer was quiet, certain. "I know who you are, Mr. Zeff. This is you becoming who you want to be." The choice hung in the air between them, violence or patience, destruction or strategy, the man he'd been or the man he could become. Noah stood slowly, documents still spread across the bed like evidence of his own blindness. "How fast can your lawyer move?" he asked. Sandra's smile was small but lethal. "He'll have the papers filed by noon tomorrow. But first, you need to leave this building like you were never here." What Noah didn't know was that Sandra's plan had one more piece, a piece that would detonate to Johnny's world in less than 12 hours. Dawn broke over the city in shades of gray that matched the exhaustion in Noah's bones. He hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. He'd spent the night in his penthouse staring at the ring box still sitting on his desk, the engagement ring he'd planned to give to Johnny after her graduation. 2 carats, platinum band, a future that never existed. By 6:45 a.m., he was dressed in the charcoal suit he wore to legitimate business meetings, the version of himself that didn't carry guns or negotiate with blood. Sandra met him in the lobby of his lawyer's building at 7 sharp, carrying a leather portfolio that contained everything needed to end to Johnny's world. Marcus Chen's office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, appropriate for a man who'd defended Noah through 3 RICO investigations and made federal prosecutors look like amateurs. Chen was already at his desk when they arrived, reading glasses perched on his nose, takeout coffee steaming beside his keyboard. Noah spread Sandra's evidence across the mahogany conference table. Bank statements, contracts, text messages, audio recordings, 8 weeks of documentation organized with prosecutorial precision. Chen read in silence for 11 minutes. Then he looked up, and for the first time in their 15-year professional relationship, Marcus Chen smiled. "This is airtight," he said, tapping the bank statements. "Provable fraud, breach of implied contract, misuse of property, unjust enrichment." He picked up the audio recording transcript. "And with this? She can't claim it was a misunderstanding or that you're exaggerating. This is premeditated deception with clear intent to defraud." "She'll fight back," Noah said quietly. "Of course she will." Chen leaned back in his leather chair. "She'll countersue for defamation. Claim the evidence is fabricated. Maybe try to flip the script with abuse allegations. Say you were controlling, that this lawsuit is retaliation for her trying to leave you." Sandra spoke for the first time since entering the office. "I have witnesses. Building staff who saw Mr. Zeff's respectful distance. Delivery drivers who can confirm he never stayed overnight. Neighbors who heard her filming sessions." Chen's smile widened. "With your maid as a witness and this documentation, she doesn't have a case. It'll be ugly. She'll make noise, try to paint herself as the victim, maybe leak selective details to social media. But you'll win. Financially, legally, completely." "How much?" Noah asked. Chen calculated on his legal pad. "Rent for 6 months at $4,200 monthly. Furniture and electronics totaling approximately $80,000. Monthly support payments of $3,000 for 6 months. Emotional distress is harder to quantify for someone in your profession, but we can argue reputational damage." He circled a number. $300,000 in restitution plus attorney fees. "And we include the OnlyFans operation in the filing, public record, permanently searchable, attached to her real name." By 11:30 a.m., the lawsuit was filed. By noon, a process server caught to Johnny leaving his apartment, and handed her the papers. Noah's phone started ringing at 12:07 p.m. to Johnny's name flashing on the screen. He declined the call. She called again. Declined. Again. Declined. 14 calls in 20 minutes. At 12:26 p.m., Noah sent a single text message. "You should have just been honest. Now everyone will know what you are." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then a wall of text started coming through, denials, accusations, threats, promises, desperate bargaining. Noah read the first sentence and then blocked her number. Chen called at 1:15 p.m. "She's already contacted 3 attorneys." All of them declined representation after seeing the evidence summary. She's going to have trouble finding someone willing to take this case. Noah hung up and looked at Sandra, who'd stayed by his side through the entire morning. What happens now? Sandra's expression was unreadable. Now we wait for her to realize she can't win legally. And then we see what she does when she's desperate. What neither of them knew was that Tijani's desperation would lead her to make one final, catastrophic mistake, and it would happen in less than 48 hours. The story leaked at 3:47 p.m., not through Noah's connections, but through Sandra's carefully placed anonymous tip to a mid-tier gossip blog that specialized in influencer drama. The post went live with a headline that detonated across social media. Local OnlyFans creator sued by boyfriend for $300,000 fraud. Court documents reveal shocking deception. The blog included everything: Tijani's full legal name, screenshots of the lawsuit's most damning sections, her OnlyFans username, and enough details to make the story irresistible to share. By 6 p.m., it had been picked up by 3 larger sites. By 8 p.m., Tijani's phone number, pulled from public records attached to the lawsuit, was circulating in comment sections. Her social media accounts went private within the hour, but the damage was done. Screenshots lived forever. Tijani's mother called at 9 p.m., according to phone records later submitted to court. Her father at 9:15. Her younger sister at 9:47, the call lasting 37 seconds before ending abruptly. Her university's Title IX office received concerned emails from anonymous sources by midnight, complete with links to the court filing and questions about whether a student engaged in fraud should retain her scholarship. The 3 men she'd hired, professional performers with reputations to protect, voided their contracts by dawn. Their agency sent a cease and desist to Tijani, distancing themselves from any association with fraud or deception. Her OnlyFans account was flagged, investigated, and suspended pending review of the legal claims. Tijani's perfect plan collapsed in less than 12 hours, buried under an avalanche of public exposure she'd never prepared for. The legal warfare lasted 3 months: depositions, motions, court appearances that felt like theatrical performances of destruction. Tijani cycled through 4 attorneys, each one trying a different strategy, each one failing against Sandra's meticulous documentation. First strategy: abuse allegations. Tijani claimed Noah was controlling, that the lawsuit was retaliation for her trying to leave a toxic relationship. Sandra's testimony, backed by building staff, neighbors, and delivery drivers, destroyed that narrative. Mr. Zeff called before every visit, the doorman testified. Always respectful. Never stayed overnight without Miss Tijani's explicit invitation, which was rare. Second strategy: hacking defense. Tijani claimed her OnlyFans account was compromised, that someone else had been running the operation using her identity. Financial forensics, bank logins, IP addresses, withdrawal patterns, proved she'd opened the account, managed it personally, and withdrawn every payment to her personal checking account. Her own text messages bragging about income sealed that coffin. Third strategy: victim narrative. Paint Noah as a dangerous criminal using the legal system to harm a vulnerable woman. The judge, a silver-haired woman who'd presided over organized crime cases for 20 years, shut that down with surgical precision. Mr. Zeff's profession is not on trial here, counselor. Your client's documented actions are. Please confine your arguments to the evidence. During the final week of trial, Noah sat in the gallery watching Sandra on the witness stand. She wore a simple navy dress, her hands folded calmly in her lap, her voice steady as she recounted 8 weeks of documentation. I overheard Miss Tijani and her performers rehearsing what to say if Mr. Zeff arrived unexpectedly, Sandra testified. They practiced the abuse narrative, discussed camera angles, talked about how much the story would be worth to tabloids. She paused, meeting the judge's eyes. I didn't want to betray Miss Tijani's privacy. But I couldn't watch Mr. Zeff walk into a trap designed to destroy him. Tijani's attorney tried to break her on cross-examination. Isn't it true you had feelings for Mr. Zeff? That this is simply jealousy? Sandra's answer was devastating in its simplicity. I had respect for Mr. Zeff. Respect for anyone being deliberately deceived and exploited. If that's jealousy in your definition, counselor, then yes, I was jealous that Miss Tijani could sleep at night knowing what she was doing. Noah watched Sandra defend him with the same quiet strength she'd shown that midnight in the hallway, and he realized something that made his chest tighten. She'd protected him when his own judgment failed. She'd seen him as human, not just powerful. She'd risked her job, her safety, her anonymity, for nothing except doing what was right. The verdict came down on a Friday afternoon. Tijani owed Noah $280,000 in restitution plus $47,000 in legal fees. Her OnlyFans account was permanently banned based on the fraud findings. Her university launched an ethics investigation. Her family stopped returning her calls. She left the courtroom crying, mascara streaking down her face, alone. The friends who might have supported her had vanished when the evidence went public. The family who might have defended her couldn't reconcile the daughter they knew with the woman in those court documents. Noah watched her go and felt nothing, no satisfaction, no vindication, just the hollow understanding that revenge didn't fill the space betrayal carved out. But when he turned and saw Sandra waiting by the courtroom doors, something shifted. She hadn't left, hadn't disappeared when her testimony was done. She'd stayed, and Noah realized that while he'd been focused on destroying what he'd lost, he'd been blind to what he'd found. But would he have the courage to act on it before it was too late? We're at the final chapter, and trust me, you don't want to miss this ending. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales. Drop a comment telling me what you think Noah should do. Now, let's finish this. 4 months after the trial, Noah sat in his penthouse office watching rain streak down floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city he'd once ruled through fear. The office belonged to Zeph Import, Export, a legitimate business he'd been building piece by piece, slowly stepping away from the violence that had defined him for 15 years. The transition wasn't easy. Old contacts still called with opportunities. Rival bosses still tested boundaries. But Noah was learning that real power didn't come from how many men feared you, it came from building something that couldn't be taken away with a bullet. The door opened quietly. Sandra entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, same as she had every morning for the past 4 months. She'd transitioned from the maid to executive assistant, without fanfare, handling his legitimate business affairs with the same meticulous attention she'd applied to documenting Tijani's betrayal. But Noah finally saw her now, really saw her. The intelligence in her dark eyes that had recognized a trap he'd been blind to. The quiet strength that had physically stopped him from destroying himself. The loyalty that had asked for nothing in return, not recognition, not money, not even acknowledgement. She set his coffee on the desk, black with 1 sugar, exactly how he took it. Detail she'd noticed without being told. The ring box sat next to his laptop, a small velvet square he'd been carrying in his jacket pocket for 2 weeks, unsure how to bridge the impossible gap between employer and equal, between gratitude and something far more complicated. Something that felt like genuine love but terrified him because he'd been so catastrophically wrong before. Sandra, he said, and she turned, eyebrow raised at the use of her first name. In 4 months, he'd never stopped calling her Miss Ausen, out of respect for the professional boundary she'd maintained. She set down her own coffee cup, waiting. Noah didn't kneel. That would feel performative, wrong, too much like the fantasy proposal he'd imagined with Tijani. Instead, he opened the velvet box and placed it on the desk between them. The ring inside wasn't the 2-carat statement piece he'd bought for someone else. This was simpler, a single diamond, elegant, understated. Real. I spent 6 months in love with a fantasy, Noah said quietly, forcing himself to meet her eyes. Someone I wanted Tijani to be, instead of seeing who she actually was. I was so focused on building a future with an illusion that I didn't notice the only person who actually gave a damn about me. Sandra's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened slightly on her coffee cup. You're the only person who's been honest with me, Noah continued. Who protected me when I couldn't protect myself? Who saw me as more than just powerful or dangerous or useful? He paused, the words harder than any confession he'd ever made. I'm not asking you to be my maid, or my savior, or some replacement for what I lost. I'm asking if you'd consider being my partner. Equal. Real. Building something together instead of you serving me. Sandra looked at the ring, then at Noah, her analytical gaze searching his face for something he hoped she'd find. You're serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She picked up the ring, examining it with the same methodical focus she'd applied to Tijani's bank statements and contracts. Turning it in the light. Checking the setting. Reading the inscription inside the band he'd had engraved, "Truth over fantasy." Then she met his eyes, and Noah saw something he'd never seen before, vulnerability mixed with strength. "I didn't save you to become another woman you keep in a nice apartment, Noah. If I say yes, we're building something together. I'm not here to serve you. I'm here to stand with you. As equals, as partners. No pedestals, no power imbalances, no repeating old patterns. That's all I want," Noah said, and meant it with every part of himself he'd thought Tijani had destroyed. Equal. Real. Someone who'll tell me when I'm wrong and stop me when I'm about to do something stupid. Sandra smiled, small, genuine, devastating. "You're going to do a lot of stupid things. I know. And I'm going to call you out every single time. I'm counting on it." She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, because Noah had paid attention to details, finally, for the right person. He'd noticed her hands during those long nights of trial preparation. Noticed everything about her he'd been too blind to see before. "Then yes," Sandra said, her voice steady and sure. "Let's build something real." Outside, rain continued to fall on the city Noah once ruled through fear and violence. But inside this office, in this moment, he was building something entirely new, a future based on trust instead of control, partnership instead of possession, honesty instead of comfortable fantasy. The Mafia boss who once believed power came from violence and fear learned the truth from a maid who taught him one word: quiet. And in that silence, in that moment of forced patience when every instinct screamed for blood, he'd finally heard what actually mattered. Not revenge, not dominance, not the hollow satisfaction of destroying someone who'd betrayed him, but the quiet strength of someone who'd saved him from himself, asking nothing in return except that he become the man he wanted to be instead of the man he'd always been. Noah stood and took Sandra's hand, the ring catching the gray light filtering through rain-streaked windows. And for the first time since that midnight 4 months ago, he smiled, not with satisfaction or victory, but with something far more dangerous and real. Hope.